Hello, welcome to the Augmentation of Man. I am Renee Miller,
Kent.
and we are giving the future. Today, we're going to be talking about lessons that we received regarding communicating with the higher self and beyond. So this is a compilation of lessons that we received from our spiritual mentors, the ancients, which are ancient teachers and mentors of the Creator, not ancient humans.
But we're going to go on to another topic soon.
It's
Which
actually
will
our
be
next
quite-
video is quite interesting because we were starting to incorporate it into this one, and then we started receiving more guidance, more lessons from our mentors about this subject. And so we decided to make it a separate video in itself because it became quite lengthy.
And to me, this new subject is quite interesting because it has to do with what's coming and what we are going to try to unpuzzle.
So this whole series has been about the higher self, what the higher self is, which is a part of the soul. It works in conjunction, or is it is an aspect of the soul that guides the higher learning process. And the soul is like the flash drive or the hard drive of the computer, where it stores all that information. All these lessons that we're learning from this life and all past lives are all stored in the soul. The higher self is the part that it's like the program running it, and it is directing the learning process.
In my meditations, I do not get meditation every day. I only get it when we need to teach it, because meditations don't happen every time you try to meditate. You don't get information.
I think maybe you need to elaborate a little bit more. You can meditate at any
You
time,
can meditate,
but
at any
you're
time,
talking
you're
about
not
the
gonna- You're not going
communications.
to get communication at any time. Many times it'll be nothing, just be a blank
Yeah.
spot. But when they want to give me the information to pass on to our viewers, then I'll receive quite a bit.
Mhm. And let's be clear, in past years when we first started, we had daily and often several times a day
Well, we had
communications.
a lot to learn then. We didn't
We
know
did.
much.
But we are under a period of time of great change, and all these other higher beings are actively involved in that change to facilitate it. And so they're not as readily available to us as they used to be. I do want to say that our next video is concerning the conjunction of Neptune. And Neptune has a cycle of about 12 years. We're coming toward the end of that cycle, and it has been setting up the conditions for this period of time when there will be many people who have the opportunity to reconnect or reintegrate with their higher self. And with that, there's other things, many exciting things that happen when you're able to do that. And we're going to go into that a little bit more today. And if you haven't seen our previous videos, go back and check out. We've got, I think this is probably about the 6th one in a series about the higher self.
Okay. Well, with that, let's go on with today's program.
And we're going to
And we'll
again
share
the screen, and we're going to have a PowerPoint. So this is about communicating with the higher self and beyond, spiritual communication.
So the soul's box contains the higher self and soul, we have stated in our previous videos, but we'll repeat this again. To open the soul's box is to know your value, and everyone has value, but you do not know your value and the worthiness of self that lasts within. You have to understand who you are. The box is the mentor of your being. This is what causes you to be who you are and who you probably will be. Be fruitful in understanding who you are, and your value will be set forth. So once you begin to understand who you are, then you will begin to understand your value. All is in your mind's wind. The soul's box is the higher self. You are who you've always been and who you will be. You are in reality. Who you are is in reality.
So let's
And-
digest this a little bit, because it's quoted, this is exactly the way that this communication came through. So they're talking about a soul's box, which is kind of awkward in trying to wrap your mind around what this means. But the box, basically, when you look up the definition of box, it's a compartment or container for holding something. So they're talking about there is a specific area, a container that holds your soul, and with the soul, the higher self. And our task as we come to completion of this cycle of learning is to really uncover who we are at the soul level, to get in touch with that that spirit within that has all that stored knowledge, so we can start downloading it back to our physical self.
You download what you need and what you can understand at that particular time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're not going to have full access, but it will start to trickle in. And anytime you have these changes going on, there is a slow integration. So these things don't happen overnight. The worthiness of the self or the soul is the accumulated knowledge, wisdom that you've accumulated over multiple lifetimes.
So with that, see who you've always been, you'll find out,
Mm-hmm.
and that is who you will be.
So we are who we've always been,
yeah,
and who we always will be, because the higher self is
changes.
Well, it does change in
Well,
our level of
In
understanding
a level
and
of
wisdom.
understanding, but you don't change. You just become more aware of your understanding.
And so as we move along through all of our experiences, we're learning from that, and we're supposed to internalize those lessons. And then that gets added to this plethora of other information, of experiences and wisdom that we've gathered throughout all lifetimes into the soul that is the flash drive, or the hard drive of the computer, so to speak.
How can we decipher this communication between the higher self and a mentor? Because our minds are so cluttered with what is going on around us that we have a hard time concentrating or clearing the mind.
And also our mind is cluttered with a lot of events that have happened in this lifetime, and we tend to hold on to them and really become victims of those events. And so we have to be able to find ways of removing that clutter so that we can move on. And it's all about our future at this point.
So the higher self is the box in which communication is processed, not the soul itself. And the higher self is processed so we can try to understand it. Increased higher self relies on higher communication for manipulatory guidance. increased visualization can be obtained through the higher self process from outside the self. A cumulative process to be learned. Let me explain that last sentence to those who may not understand it. Increased visualization can be obtained through the higher self process from outside the self.
Mhm. So the higher self is the compartment that holds the soul and the higher self, is what is intercepting outside communication. And then it is deciphering that communication and then speaks to the physical self.
That's where you can begin to understand what they're talking about.
So the higher self is able to take in a higher level of communication and kind of digest it a bit and present it to the physical self at a lower level of understanding, a simpler understanding that we in this life can understand. And so the communication is processed at the soul level.
Yeah.
The increased higher self relies on a higher communication for manipulatory guidance. And what we mean by that is to be able to adapt or change through the advice and counseling of these other higher entities. When we receive this outside communication, they shed light and expand our understanding of the situation or what they're trying to teach us in such a way that it actually has an impact on the way we think, and through the way we think, through the way we behave, because our behavior is secondary to what's going on in our minds. The increased visualization can be obtained through the higher self process from outside self. So what they're saying is these spiritual guides can give us visions to augment our understanding. So
to help us understand what they're trying to say.
Right. Sometimes it's easier to show you than it is to tell you. And so these visions that you can have in meditation can help you to understand.
Actually, sleep is a metaphor.
Yeah.
If you can unwind those metaphors, you begin to understand.
Yeah.
Remember, we are basically kindergartners in this whole
in the universe.
Yeah.
And so outside entities have progressed further than we have. We are really kind of at the bottom of civilization as far as our level of understanding and experience and wisdom. So we have these other beings that are there to help us, to help facilitate our understanding and bring us up in our wisdom. And that also increases our vibration, because vibration directly correlates to levels of understanding when it comes to universal consciousness.
So integration with a higher self must include the creator and God in many of your terms. When I said I could hear the creator talking to my higher self, then my higher self talked to me. I have a lot to learn. Then I heard the word courage. So all things are controlled by laws set outside this world. They're universal laws. There are many religions, yet there is only one creator, one God. A protacious understanding, reliance on the self, the higher self, can only happen with the conjunction of the creator or God.
So this gives an example of how this process works. Kent could hear the creator talking to his higher self, which has his higher self has a higher level of understanding than most of us. And then, and he was sent here, or he volunteered, I should say, to come here to teach. And so his higher self is able to understand and accept a higher energy level that's coming from the creator, and then be able to transform that into an understanding that his physical self is able to comprehend. And he could hear that process. He could hear the communication from the creator to his higher self, and then he could hear the communication from his higher self to his physical
Yeah, the
self.
higher self explains it where I can understand it.
Mm-hmm. And so our soul is much bigger and much wiser and communicates differently than we do here on Earth. We're kind of in this dumbed down state, and vibrationally we've been manipulated vibrationally to come here to open certain pathways for certain events and people come into our lives to learn lessons from those things.
Yeah, so remember, these laws are set. They're controlled and set by outside this planet. This is only one planet among hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of other planets. So here on this planet, there are many religions that man has created. And all these religions has caused the issues over eons. But there is only one creator. And that's it, one creator.
And we are able to access this information by going within and listening. When you clear the mind and listen to that inner voice, and you have to be able to decipher, because it's not always correct. But for the most part, these higher beings are all about teaching. And so if it is a communication that's helping you to understand something, then that should be a good indicator that you're receiving this information from a higher entity. And so they continue a protaceous understanding, which is the first or original understanding through God, between God and humanity. And I think of that kind of like in the Bible, they talk about a contract between God and humanity. Contract's not the word. What is the word I'm looking
for? Well, it's kind of a contract in a way.
Well, there's more, there's a word that's more often used.
Appropriate.
And so reliance on the higher self can only happen in conjunction with God the creator. So we have to have God, we have to bring God back into our lives.
Bring the creator back into the lives of humans.
This is part of the problem that exists today.
Not religion, but bring the creator back in.
Our higher self is the direct connection to the creator.
Spiritual communication, reconnect with the self first. If you reconnect with the self, you connect with the creator. So your perceptive understanding to the relationship of the higher self and the communicative process, learn this understanding that we have been just talking about. The question was that Renee gave. So one has to reconnect to the higher self in order to communicate. And the answer they gave was correct. A process somewhat self-indulgent in the higher plane without the ego involved. Again, without the ego involved. A communicative, theoretical understanding of self-indulgence without the egotistical interferences of the self. The opening of the communicative process.
So I want to point this out. When we spell self with lowercase, we're talking about the physical self, and self with a higher case, we're talking about the higher self. So they're talking about being self-indulgent in that we're bowing to our own whims and our desires, passions, but it is not for purposes that are, how should I say it, trying to bring attention to ourselves. It is for purposes of elevating ourselves in our level of integrating a higher understanding and wisdom. And so it's self-indulgent only in that we are trying to spiritually evolve without having the influence of the ego, the look at me. And so it's not about the bragging and the look at me, but it's about how can I raise my own vibration? How can I have a more comprehensive understanding of not only the events in my life and those around me,
well, what caused them and the meaning of them.
Right. And that's a part of it. But also, how do we fit into the universe of all that exists? And that's a part of it. We have to understand who we are before we can understand where we fit into the universal construct. And so this communicative theoretical understanding is the conceptual ideas that form an explanation of the event that happens.
Yeah.
When we have this communication, when we have spiritual guides who can help impart a more expansive understanding of what's going on in our lives, then conceptual ideas is to be able to see all these different data points and be able to connect the dots so that you see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And that's what their job is.
And they said, your perceptive understanding to the relationship of the higher self and the communicative process, learn that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So integration with the higher self is self-taught. Well, it's not integration. You can get some help. It's not totally self-taught, but
we do the work ourselves.
Yeah. With the reconnection, is there a flood of past memories from past lives? That was an interesting question. Realization of important learning events. It's consequential into being.
So you may not have full recollection of all past lives,
I don't think we have much.
But you'll have realization of important things where you learned certain things that were consequential to your understanding today. So for example, from the time that I was a young child, I had a memory of being involved in an automobile accident as a young girl. And we were hit. The front right fender was hit by another vehicle, and I was thrown from the car and landed on the pavement. And my mother, I remember, got out of the car and she came around and was holding my head and she was sobbing and she was saying, why her? Why couldn't it have been me? Meanwhile, I was hovering above and I could see everything that was happening. And I was saying to her, Mom, I'm right here. Mom, I'm right here. But she couldn't hear me. And I was really confused about this for many, many years because I associated it with this lifetime. And I could remember the color of the car and what my mother looked like and everything. And she was similar in, what my mother looked like in this lifetime in her younger years. So I was confusing it with this life. And then when Kent started being able to receive these lessons and I finally asked about it, they said, no, that was how your last life ended. So I had full recollection of how I died and the circumstances around that. But it added to my understanding today that we don't just die and that's the end of it. We don't have any life that continues, but we do. We still exist beyond this physical body. And that is a consequence. When they talk about consequences, it's a consequence of understanding that has been a big influence in my belief system today. And
Yeah.
that's what this message is about.
So the other question that Renee asked is, what determines the timing of the integration with the higher self? And the answer was always integration self-taught.
Mhm. So we have to do the work ourselves, and
Yeah.
and so there's steps to the process.
Mm.
And this next lesson here,
It says you have
Is-
to understand or release your past.
mhm,
You can't dwell. You have to release your past. You have to release and understand why it happened to you, and then the results of what's happening up to who you think you are now.
mhm.
So only then, upon the release of all your past events, are you able to go into meditation for communication. We are not here for self-denial. The protrusion for your understanding is widespread.
So what they're saying here is that when we hold on to these past events in our lives,
And
they
you live in
often
the past then.
they're often traumatic. But what
Mhm.
happens is that we let it define who we are
Mhm.
today, and it is not who we are. And oftentimes it is painted around the picture of a victimhood. And so that entraps us into this thinking that these events are who I am, and I am a victim, and it holds us back from moving forward. And where our true growth is coming up. This ending of this cycle and the beginning of the next is our opportunity to break away from that.
Yeah.
And to move forward, because this period of time where Neptune has been setting up this energy field is all about releasing that and to move into our next cycle of learning, which is a higher cycle of learning. And it involves our reintegration with a higher self.
Yeah, unfortunately, everyone doesn't want to let go of their past. So there's not going to be everyone who's going to be able to go in there and find out who they are and why they're here. It's not possible because many people want to live in the past. They want to portray themselves as victims.
And the other thing I have to say is that there's things that happen to us that are no fault of our own. And so sometimes people do terrible things to other people, and it doesn't mean that we invited that, but that they are the ones that have the problem. And so we have to go back to what happened in their childhood, what happened in their life to create the circumstances for them to behave this way. And that's where the lesson is. It's not about me. So let it go. Let's move forward.
With this integration, we become avid learners. When the opening of the higher self occurs, what will change as far as what we see and hear here? That was the question asked. The answer was status of the self will reflect on higher learning. A mobile concept reflecting understanding of the higher self. Prolific in nature as a concretance set in the understanding of procedures to higher learning aspects. So the question was asked, so humanity will realize a greater aspiration to learn? The answer was true. Confidence in the self, a grandiose experience.
So our status of the higher self will eventually come to understand, when we have that integration with the higher self, when we understand who we are more at the soul level, we start to really focus on, okay, this is what's important to the soul. It's our expanding consciousness and understanding and wisdom. So then you turn that to your current life and you say, okay, that's what the purpose is here. Let's focus on that. And we become these prolific learners, and we start to really expand in our consciousness, and our vibration starts to rise very quickly at that point too. And so it's something that we take with us when they talk about a mobile concept, reflecting understanding of the higher self. We now understand what it is that we're supposed to be doing here. And then we
And the
really focus
procedures.
on that.
Procedures. There's a procedure that has to take place
Mhm.
to the understanding of the higher self. And you have to follow these procedures.
And the true confidence in the self, a grandiose experience.
It's
They're
a huge
saying
experience.
it's a grand and impressive experience. So we will have much to be thankful for, and much amazement at where we will go once we're able to accomplish this.
So to summarize what we covered, the higher self and soul are contained within a compartment called the soul's box. And we explained what the soul's box is. What
Basically houses them.
Yeah.
The higher self relies on outside guidance to attain higher states of wisdom and enlightenment.
Yeah.
And without that outside guidance, I just want to interject this, is that part of the state of our society today, this downward spiral, is a direct result of losing that outside guidance from outside teachers. So they're the ones, they're absolutely necessary to keep us evolving to higher and higher states of consciousness. But thousands of years ago, humanity thought that it knew it all and took a different path, a different timeline. And what happened was these guides and these mentors just stepped back and said, okay, you think you know it all. Let's see where this is going to go. And they knew that it would be our downward spiral.
Yeah. So we must come to understand the relationship between the higher self and the communication process. And like I said, it is a process within. Nurturing that process without involving the ego. The ego is a destroyer of the self.
Mm-hmm. The ego also, when there's ego involved, it serves as an attractant for negative entities, because they know they can manipulate you through feeding your ego.
Yeah.
Understand why all past events happen to you, and then release the anxiety, letting it all go. So just come to an understanding. It doesn't have to be in depth, but enough to release it and just say, there's nothing I can do about that now. I understand it as much as I can understand it at this point, and I need to move on.
We integrate with the higher self by going within, meditating and listening to the inner voice, which we have talked about over and over and over again.
And it's a slow process.
Yes, meditation and the meaning of your dreams, to unwind those, to understand this whole concept of the self process.
And these events in our lives, they said it's not so much the event itself, it's what led up to the event. So what were the circumstances? What were the decisions that led up to that final event happening? That's where the learning is. That's where we need to focus. The higher self becomes our mentor of wisdom and understanding. So when we're able to reconnect with our higher self, then that inner voice starts to be our mentor and talk to us to help us to understand things better.
Then outside communication can occur for some, not all, but for those that are able to clear their mind and visualize or go into meditation. It's very difficult. Not easy.
It's a very slow process, and that's just the way it works. And I think universal laws are part of that, because they want to allow us enough time to be able to really think about things and to integrate the understanding so that we have a balanced understanding. Integration with the higher self must include God the Creator, and we must return to God at this time. There's been a lot of secular
And she's talking about
paths
returning to the Creator, not returning to religion.
right. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with religion
If
other
you
than
include the Creator, the teachings of the Creator.
yeah, as long as it's teaching. This is the problem, is that a lot of the teachings originate with man, and man doesn't, because we've lacked the spiritual guidance for the understanding of those words, then man interprets it wrong. And even though these are pastors and preachers and spiritual leaders that have gone to school, does not mean that they are interpreting the messages correctly.
Integration with the higher self creates a grand and impressive experience in learning. Yes, you'll be impressed with the higher self once you are able to attach to it.
And it opens up this whole new realm of understanding that's really exciting. So this finishes with a voracious appetite for learning and discussion will exist among the human race. So once we're able to get through these tumultuous times, and it comes from the change, it comes from the old guard wanting to hold on to their power and control, and we're moving into a period of self-sovereignty, and they don't want that, obviously. And there's a lot of tension and chaos with that, but there's also a lot of chaos as our old way of thinking is destroyed and being replaced by the truths that are coming out now. And also the all the systems that were created in the old paradigm that are no longer applicable in the new paradigm, they have to be destroyed. So we see a crumbling of systems that are contributing to that.
As you replace the old way of thinking with the new things being learned, you'd be surprised. Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Because you're replacing the old way of thinking. And this way you can move forward.
But we have to have an open mind, and we have to be able to decipher, you know, it's like, does this make sense? When the way I look at it is that when things start to correlate, when you can connect the dots, then you're probably onto something.
Okay.
We have a number of lessons in the Augmentation of Man series, a study in Renaissance. If you would like to further delve into these lessons, this is about bridging the worlds of math, science, spirituality, and astronomy. And we are not astronomers, but or astrologers, but these are lessons on that, chakras, karma, dimensions.
It's in a question and answer form.
Yes, just like we're presenting today. And then the second book is The Acquiescence of Humanity, and that is bringing us up to genetically up to a higher level, bringing us to a new truth, and then integrating us into.
Bringing us, it's giving the guidance that we can bring ourselves up to a higher level.
of understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then integrating humanity into the universal neighborhood.
Okay. With that, I want to thank you for being with us today.
And peace be with you on your journey to enlightenment. Don't forget to hit the like button if you've gotten something out of this video today. Thank you.